What's up guys, Jam here. Today we're talking about compressors. How do we use them, why do we use them, and how they can improve your sound. One of the best explanations of a compressor that I've seen so far was by Nolly through a video I watched a while ago. And I'm going to try and replicate that as much as possible and dumb it down and simplify it for you guys as much as possible so you can understand how compressors work and how we use them and why we would actually use them. So think about a compressor as a person who's standing holding that fader, right? And what the person is supposed to do is lower the fader every time the volume coming into that fader surpasses a certain limit that you specify. So for example, you set a fader at a certain limit, and whenever the coming in through that goes beyond that, that person would bring the fader down. And that's exactly what a compressor is doing. Having said that, there's a bunch of elements that go into it. But there's threshold and there's the ratio. So the threshold is the initial level that you don't want that volume to go, or that level to go beyond. And the ratio is how much do we pull down that fader when that level goes beyond that threshold. Another thing that you will telling the compressor as well is release time and attack time. And that's technically how fast, with the attack time, how fast do you want that person to react when they see that level going beyond the threshold. So if you have a slow attack, that means that person is going to take time seeing that level go up, take whatever time you set for him, and then bring that fader down. The faster the attack is, the faster the reaction of that person is. With the release time is technically how long before that person turns that fader to the initial level that we set. How long would it take him to, after bringing it down to whatever level we decided to based on the ratio, to bring back that fader up to the initial level and initial threshold that we set. Let me show you a visual representation here. It'll be a lot easier to explain when you actually see it. For that reason, let's use the... what am I doing? Okay, so for that reason, let's put up the mixer. And I'm going to be using the FabFilter C2, Pro C2. So this is a compressor, and this is exactly what we were talking about now. The threshold is where you want that level to be. The ratio is how much reduction you want it per 1 dB, the attack, and the release time. I'll remove the auto gain leveling. All right, so I have a snare track here, and it's easier to visualize when you see the peaks on the snare and what's happening. I'm going to disable now the compressor and get you to listen to that snare. Let's do that. Let's see what happens now. So that's the snare sound. Let me actually disable the threshold, no threshold whatsoever, so you can actually see the spikes. So this is where our snare is. This is where our hit is, right? So what we want is, we want to reduce that hit, right? And the reason we're using a compressor here, for example, one of the reasons is actually having a consistent sound of a snare. So we all know a drummer cannot hit the same level it's humanly impossible to have the same level all the time. So what we do is, when we set a threshold and we reduce everything to that level, we have a more consistent snare sound. So let's do that. See, if you look here, that's what's happening for every okay, so we almost have it to 4:1. So for every 1 dB that goes beyond that threshold, the compressor is bringing it down 4 dBs. And in that case, we have one level of the snare. So what we're doing now is we're kind of making it as consistent as possible. Let's play around with the threshold and see what happens. So this is super squashed. What's happening is because we set because we set the threshold so low, the reduction is getting crazy, and no transients are passing through. So technically, the snare is super squashed, and we're losing a lot of the identity and transient of that snare. I'll bring back the threshold, and you'll see what I mean. Another way to use the same compression as well is to get more attack. What does that mean? How can you get more attack of a snare? So it's all about the transient. You know, when the sound, the wave starts, goes up to the peak and goes down, that transient is the highest impact point. So in that case, if your attack is somehow fast, you kill that transient completely. Let's do the attack again one more time. Fast attack versus slow attack, and you see how the transient pops more when the slower the attack is. So what's happening is we're letting that peak go through and then mute everything else. So that is the focus of the sound, and that's how it just sounds a lot more punchy and it has a lot more attack. So that's why we usually recommend somehow with a medium to slow attack on the snare, so we can actually get that punch, that impact. Also, the release has a lot to do with it. So let's go into a medium attack. And so the release is technically what we just spoke about. How long do you stay down before you go back up with that fader? And let's see how that affects your sound. If you notice, you can hear the snares rattling and the fast release, and completely dead on the slow release because we already, put the release time to very slow. So I hope this explains a bit how compression work. There's a lot more details about it, but I don't want to complicate it too much. That's the basic principle. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of it. Try it, play around with it. All compressors are almost the same, so you'll always have a threshold, ratio, attack, and release. The representation might be different, but they're all the same. So let me know if this works for you. Let me know if you understood it. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comment below. Please like, subscribe, and share this video to help support me on the channel, and I'll see you next time.